Howdy ho folks, CR here, and there's something I'm getting a little bit tired of, and it's constantly hearing this question over and over and over again like it hasn't been answered before, and that is, why won't you support universal background checks? And it's always seemed to me like the people who ask this seem very much so like pedantic children. And by the way, if you're one of the people who this might apply to, you're going to get the question answered in this video, so it might behoove you to watch. And if you're not going to watch and then go around continuing to ask other people this question, well, why won't you support universal background checks? I don't see how this is so hard. You're probably the one that needs to watch it. And if you don't watch it, you're just proving my point that you are just asking that question to be pedantic, and you don't really want that question answered. You just want to keep on asking like a child until the adult gives in finally to you, just to shut you up. So, let's get started on this. Reason number one, it does adversely affect law-abiding gun owners. A lot of the times, the gun controllers will pretend like it's no big deal, or that we're just trying to avoid some minor inconveniences, but that's just not the case. See, when you go in to get a background check done on a firearm, there's usually at least a $15 fee, and then when you want to use the FFL to transfer a firearm that's not yours, say send it off to somebody in another state, well, they usually have an FFL's fee attached to that too. Alright, so it's not going to be any different when Joe and John go into the FFL to trade a firearm. They're not going to simply just charge the NICS fee. They're going to charge you for their time and efforts. And that NICS fee is at least usually $15, and they'll probably tack on a $10, $20 fee on that one. So you're looking probably about at least $25, you know, just so John can give Joe that firearm, transfer that firearm, even though John knows that Joe ain't a prohibited person to begin with. And for some of us, it's going to hurt us a lot worse than just one simple transfer too. I'm not the only one, but I do transfer firearms between friends and family members quite a bit. My typical transfer goes like this. One of my buddies is like, hey, man, this is a really nice rifle here. You know, I've always wanted one, but my wife just can't see spending $1,500 on one. Well, I'll tell you what, man. Why don't you take her to the range and shoot it, you know? I mean, I got to work Saturday, but if you're going to the range Saturday as is, well, I'll hand it to you here. You take your wife out to the range with you, let her fire off some rounds from this, and I guarantee you she'll change her mind on one and one. And then, just bring it back to me Saturday night. So, that's, my typical transfer. Now imagine having to loan somebody a piece of property that's yours, and then before you could loan it to them, you had to go to, say a car, and go to the car dealership. Then you had to pay $15 for a background check at the car dealership, plus another $20 service fee. We'll be generous, say $10 service fee. So it's $25 you're looking at to loan it to them, and then to get it back another $25. Imagine doing that 7-8 times a year, at least. That adds up pretty quickly. That ends up being hundreds of dollars I could have saved, hundreds of dollars I could have invested. Background checks are unenforceable without registration. How are they unenforceable? Well, let's think of this way here. The Brady campaign has advertised for quite a while how many bad guys the NICS system has stopped from purchasing a firearm for years. A small percentage of that, a very small percentage of that, I wouldn't even call it a whole percent, of those denials end up in prosecutions. Now, given the fact that you have the gun store clerk as a witness, you have the paperwork that the prohibited person filled out in their own handwriting, the fact that the NICS check was performed and it came back as a denial, and quite probably in today's world, surveillance footage from the gun store, it would seem to me like these would be slam dunk convictions. And yet it seems like prosecutors are not even willing to spend the time of day for a slam dunk conviction. So what makes you think that a prosecutor is going to waste time on a case like this? Johnny B. Thug got pulled over and got his gat found by the police. Police asked Johnny B. Thug, "Where'd you get the gun?" Johnny B. Thug doesn't answer. "Where'd you get the background check performed?" Johnny B. Thug keeps his mouth shut. He doesn't talk until he has gotten to his attorney. What makes you think that a prosecutor is going to take that case on? As for universal registration, you know what? I'm thoroughly opposed to that. Gun owners have told you no on this for quite a while. And not only that, even if the patterns that happened in California and New York and the UK and Australia aren't true, and that registered guns weren't confiscated, or letters to the owners weren't sent out telling them to either turn their gun in, dispose of it, or take it out of state, New York. Assuming all that's true, that isn't going to happen to the rest of us here in the rest of the country if we get universal registration, well, registering firearms, there are going to be fees associated with that, are there not? Name one registration bill where the firearm owners didn't have to pay any sort of fees. And being a guy like me, well, I have 50 firearms at least. You know, you take being generous on this one, $10 per, firearm for the paperwork for each firearm. And that ends up being $500. So again, that's going to negatively affect us. But as you said, you just wanted universal background checks. Item number 3. This isn't going to prevent the crimes it's touted to prevent. Adam Lanza murdered his own mother, stole her firearms, shot up Sandy Hook. After the Manchin-Tomy bill, which was a knee-jerk reaction to Sandy Hook, failed, Barack Obama had that speech in the Rose Garden, the Shameful Day speech. And he said it was shameful that universal background checks didn't pass, knowing full well that no universal background check in the world would have stopped Adam Lanza from doing what he did. So that's food for thought. I mean, you want to talk about the Vegas massacre? The dude had a clean record, was a multi-millionaire. Even the Sutherland Springs church shooting. Well, that dude passed a background check, even though he was convicted of domestic violence. Let that sink in. Reason number 4. The gun controllers are never going to be satisfied. You take Sandy Hook, for example. The rhetoric was, after the Manchin-Tomy bill failed, even after Sandy Hook, we couldn't get universal background checks. Knowing full well, and Barack Obama was one of the ones who was touting this rhetoric, they did that knowing full well that universal background checks would not have prevented Adam Lanza from murdering his own mother and stealing her guns and then going in and shooting up Sandy Hook. And guess what? Universal background checks aren't going to stop these crimes that they're touted to stop. Go back to 1993 when the Brady Bill was passed. They just wanted background checks for people in the business of selling firearms. They weren't coming after your transfers between you and your family members or you and your relatives or nothing like that. No. They just wanted to make sure people in the business of selling firearms who didn't know their own customers weren't prohibited. You know, their customers weren't prohibited anyway. A few years after that, it was a gun show loophole. You know, which, you know, basically is their language that they're using to promote bills to prohibit private people from transferring firearms, private citizens from transferring firearms. They said they wanted to prohibit private transfers or make private transfers illegal without a background check. That wouldn't have quite the same ring as a gun show loophole. It wouldn't be quite the buzzword. And back on point 2. These things are unenforceable without registration. So I can easily see if universal background checks were passed, that the gun controllers, even in a few years' time, a few short years' time, will come back and start saying, well, I can't believe you don't want to close the untraceable gun loophole. Or, I can't believe you want these secret guns in circulation. Or some other rhetoric like that. 5. Passing these universal background checks will only seek to embolden gun controllers. Think back on every election where a candidate more in favor of gun rights lost to a candidate more in favor of gun control. And it doesn't matter if this candidate that was more in favor of gun control says, well, I respect your Second Amendment rights now. After that person won, groups like Brady Campaign, Moms Demand Action, you know, came out and say, see, guys, the NRA is a paper tiger. Think back to when, say, universal background checks got passed in Washington or in Chicago. The gun controllers came out, see, guys, if we could pass it here, we could pass it everywhere. You know, they're just a paper tiger. The NRA is a paper tiger. We could continue on and pass more gun control. I mean, let's look at the New Yorkers here a second. The people who have been constantly just having to succumb to gun control law after gun control law after gun control law. All you fudders up there, you know. How did it feel when an interactive map with your name, location, and everything like that got published by a newspaper? These people aren't, you know, for all you fudders, for all you gun owners, but you support some common sense gun laws. Think about what happens when you give in to them, because that's exactly what happens. You're not going to get that pat on the head. They're going to turn around and kick you when you're down. Reason number 6, item number 6. This law sets many innocent people up for some legal troubles. First off, there are a lot of people who, even are law-abiding gun owners, who don't fully understand the laws or what they are. And it's already been ruled in the Supreme Court that ignorance of the law is not a defense for breaking the law. So imagine being little Johnny getting a rifle like this from your daddy at the age of 8. Now, your daddy held on to the rifle while you were growing up. Took you out to shoot it, taught you how to shoot, taught you responsible firearm ownership. Then you move out at 18 when you're moving into your apartment. Well, somebody sees you carrying this rifle up to your apartment, calls the police. Police come by, look at the rifle, see you have it. Then they ask you who gave you the rifle. Oh, my dad gave me the rifle. Okay, where did you get the background check performed? Little Johnny says, background check? So, police arrest Johnny, take his rifle away, and now Johnny's facing charges, as well as his dad is facing charges of failing to comply with that universal background check law. They both have to post bail. They both have to pay legal fees. That's regardless of whether or not this case actually goes to court. So yes, you can wind up getting a lot of innocent people in legal trouble with this law. So, with that being said, for those of you who couldn't understand why there's such fierce opposition to universal background checks, hopefully you understand now. And thank y'all for watching. Y'all take it easy out there. Have a great day.